Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Tes Vav Amud Aleph, 15a of Maseches Brachos. We are starting 3 lines from the bottom of the page, and today's Gemara is going to sound very familiar because much of it is similar to the last Amud. A lot of it is repeated, but it's coming from a slightly different angle. So the Gemara says in the middle of the line, Tanan Hassam. We learned in a Mishnah. This Mishnah is in Maseches Megillah, and it says as follows: Hakol ksherim likros es Megillah, chutz micheresh, shota v'katan. Anybody is kosher, is fit to read the Megillah, except for a cheresh, a deaf person, a shota, a person who is not of regular intellect, and a katan, a child. Rabbi Yehuda machshir bekatan. And Rabbi Yehuda allows a katan, a child, to read. Now ask the Gemara, Man tana cheresh diavad namilo. Who is the author of this Mishnah who seems to be saying that a cheresh, a person who's deaf, even b'diavad, if they read it, they're not kosher, it doesn't work? So, now apparently we're talking about a deaf person who can read, who can speak, they just can't hear. And the Mishnah says that anyone is kosher except for this person, this deaf person, this a shota, or a child. So who is the Tana, who is the author of this Mishnah who says that a cheresh, even b'diavad, after the fact, it wouldn't work if they read it? So Amar Rav Masna says, Rabbi Yossi, this is Rabbi Yossi Ditnan, because we learn in the Mishnah, this is our Mishnah from earlier on the Amud, HaKoresh Shema v'lo shmi'a la'azno yatsa. If a person reads Shema and they can't hear the words they're saying, they're still yotze. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, that's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi Omer lo yatsa, and Rabbi Yossi says you're not yotze, you don't fulfill your obligation of Shema if you can't hear the words. And just like you don't fulfill your obligation of Shema if you don't hear the words, you also can't fulfill the obligation of the Megillah if you can't hear the words. So a person who reads the Megillah and can't hear, they can't fulfill their obligation. So this is consistent with the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. Ask the Gemara, Mimaid Rabbi Yossi, who says it has to be Rabbi Yossi? V'diavad namilo, and the Mishnah about the Megillah is saying even b'diavad it doesn't work. Who says? Top of the next page, Dilma Rabbi Yehuda. Maybe the author of the Mishnah about reading the Megillah is Rabbi Yehuda. U'lechatchilahu delo hadiavad shaper dami. And when he said that anyone is kosher to read the Megillah except for a cheresh, a shota, a katan, he meant that lechatchila anybody could read it, except for a cheresh and a shota and a katan. But maybe b'diavad, if a cheresh, if a deaf person read it, maybe b'diavad it works. And then it could be consistent with Rabbi Yehuda by reading the Shema. He said if you read Shema and you can't hear it, you're still yotze. So maybe it's Rabbi Yehuda. Says the Gemara, Lo sakadaitach. Now you don't think that. Dekatani cheresh dumya de shota v'katan. Because cheresh is grouped with the shota and katan. Now, ma shota v'katan diavad namilo, av cheresh diavad namilo. Certainly when it says a shota and a katan are not kosher to read, it means even b'diavad, it wouldn't work if they would read, because they don't have any das. They don't have the intellect to be able to fulfill the mitzvah. So just like the when it says, it makes a list of three types of people, and it puts a cheresh, a deaf person, in the same list as a shota and a katan. And if a shota and a katan, a shota and a child, if they read, obviously, even b'diavad it doesn't work. So too, it must be that the cheresh, even b'diavad, it doesn't work, and therefore, the Mishnah can't be Rabbi Yehuda, it must be Rabbi Yossi. Ask the Gemara, who says, V'dilma hakadisa? Maybe each one has its own set of rules. Yes, they're grouped together, but they're different. They have different rules, and the cheresh, the deaf person, lichatchila can't read it, but b'diavad it would work. And the Shota and Katan, yeah, even B'diavad it wouldn't work. And maybe maybe the author of that Mishnah holds that indeed a Cheresh would work B'diavad, and therefore the author would be Rabbi Yehuda and not Rabbi Yossi. So the Gemara says, Umi matzis lukam Rabbi Yehuda? Says, what are you talking about? How could you suggest that the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda? V'amidiktani seifa, but from the fact that the second half of the Mishnah says, Rabbi Yehuda machshir b'katan, Rabbi Yehuda said a katan, a child, is kosher to read, michlal dereisha lav Rabbi Yehuda. It must be that the first half of the Mishnah is not Rabbi Yehuda. Because the Mishnah in Megillah reads, anybody can read the Megillah except for a cheresh, shota, and katan, and Rabbi Yehuda allows a katan. So obviously the first half of the Mishnah wasn't Rabbi Yehuda. So how can we suggest that the Mishnah is like Rabbi Yehuda if he only turns up to argue in the second half? Obviously the first half is not him. Says the Gemara, Vidilma kula Rabbi Yehuda. Maybe we can say the whole Mishnah is going according to Rabbi Yehuda. Utrei gavni katan. And there's just two types of katan that he's talking about, two types of children. Maybe there's just missing words, and this is what the Mishnah is supposed to say. Hakol ksherin likros ha'samagila, chutz michayrei shota v'katan. Like we have, it says, anybody is kosher to read the Megillah except for a cheresh, a deaf person, a shota, an imbecile, a person who is not of intellect, and a katan. Now this is where we have to add some words in. Now when do we say that a katan is not fit to read? That's bekatan shelo hagiya lechinach. That's a child who has not yet reached the age of chinuch, the age of training, the age of some level of understanding. But a katan who's reached the age of chinuch, even lechatchila, he can read divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda machshir bekatan, because Rabbi Yehuda allows a katan to read as long as he is of age. As long as he's reached the age of chinuch, he's old enough to understand. So Rashi says about 9 or 10 years old. So now we're suggesting maybe the whole Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. And there's just two types of katans. The first half of the Mishnah where he said a katan's not kosher, he meant a katan who has not yet reached the age of chinuch. And the second half where he says it's kosher, he meant a katan who has reached the age of chinuch, he's 9 or 10. And in terms of the cheresh, it could be that when it said that a cheresh is not kosher, it meant lechatchila. But b'diavad, a deaf person who would read it, maybe b'diavad it would work. So says the Gemara, one second. V'mayu kimta k'Rabbi Yehuda. So who are you trying to say? You're trying to say it's Rabbi Yehuda. V'diavad in lechatchila. And you're saying that b'diavad it would work, only lechatchila it doesn't work. So one second, and this is where it starts to sound familiar maybe. It's a repeat of the last Amud. Elahad Tani Rabbi Yehuda Braid Reb Shimon Pazi. But what about the Brisa of Rabbi Yehuda, the song of Reb Shimon Pazi, who says Cheresh HaMedaber Ve'eno Shomeya Tarim L'Chatchila? He says that a cheresh, a deaf person who could speak but can't hear, is allowed to separate truma L'Chatchila, even at the outset. Even though he can't hear himself, it's no problem, he could separate truma, we're not worried that he can't hear the bracha. Now Mani, whose opinion is Rabbi Yehuda Braid Reb Shimon Pazi aligning itself with? Lo Rabbi Yehuda, v'lo Rabbi Yossi. It seems it's not like neither Rabbi Yehuda nor Rabbi Yossi. Because if it's going like Rabbi Yehuda, well, right now we're suggesting that Rabbi Yehuda holds di'eved in l'chatchila lo, that only b'di'eved it works if you can't hear yourself. So when Rabbi Yehuda said in our Mishnah, or Bryce says that elaborate on our Mishnah, that if you read Shema and you can't hear your Yotze, he meant b'di'eved. And when it said that a cheresh reads the Megillah and can't hear, a deaf person who can't hear himself read the Megillah, l'chatchila, he can't read it, but b'di'avad he's yotze. But l'chatchila you can't. So, and this brisa about truma of Rabbi Yehuda, Braid Reb Shimon Pazi, is saying that even l'chatchila you could do it even though you can't hear. That doesn't fit with Rabbi Yehuda, our current version of Rabbi Yehuda, that l'chatchila you can't, and only b'di'avad it's okay if you can't hear. And Rabbi Yossi, and if you'll tell me that it's Rabbi Yossi, that's certainly not, because di'eved nami lo. Rabbi Yossi holds that even b'di'eved it doesn't work. Person reads Shema and can't hear, doesn't work at all. So, Ella my Rabbi Yehuda. So what are you going to say? You have to go back and say that Brisa is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Va'afilu l'chatchila nami. And you'll have to say that Rabbi Yehuda holds that l'chatchila you could. So l'chatchila you could read Shema even though you can't hear. And l'chatchila you could separate Truma even though you can't hear the bracha. And the Mishnah about the Mishnah about reading the Megillah, the Acharish cannot read the Megillah, must not be Rabbi Yehuda. Must be Rabbi Yossi. But one second. What about the brayso that says a person shouldn't bench in their heart? But if you said benching, if you said birkas hamazon in your heart, you're yotze even though you can't hear it. Now Mani, who's that going to go like? Now this one says l'chatchila you shouldn't, b'diavad it works. Now our old version of Rabbi Yehuda would have been perfect with this. But now we've restated Rabbi Yehuda to hold that you could do it l'chatchila even though you can't hear. And this brayso says that when it comes to benching, l'chatchila you can't, only b'diavad it works. So lo Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Yossi. It's not going like Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Yossi. I Rabbi Yehuda ha'amar fi l'chatchila nami. If you want to say it's Rabbi Yehuda says that you can, even though you can't hear, you could still do things l'chatchila. You could say Shema l'chatchila even though you can't hear. You could read Megillah l'chatchila even though you can't hear. And the same will be true for benching. So, but this brayso says that benching only b'diavad if you can't hear. Is it okay? The Rabbi Yossi, and if it's Rabbi Yossi, Amar afilu diavad nami lo. Rabbi Yossi said that it doesn't work b'diavad. So, right, if you read Shema and you can't hear, it doesn't work even b'diavad. So if you bench and you can't hear, you bench with your heart, then even b'diavad it shouldn't work. So he does not fit with this brayso. So Li'olam Rabbi Yehuda. So really we'll say, the brayso that says only b'diavad it works, that could also be Rabbi Yehuda. V'afilu l'chatchila nami. And, when it says Li'olam here, we're going to say that the one about Truma is still going to be Rabbi Yehuda. And Rabbi Yehuda holds even l'chatchila if you can't hear it's fine. And what about the brayso about benching that sounded like only b'diavad it's okay? V'lo kasha, it's not a contradiction. Hadidei hadarabe. One is himself, his own opinion. One is his Rabbi's opinion. D'tanya, because we have a brayso. Amar Rabbi Yehuda mishum Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Hakareh Shema, one who reads Shema, tzarech sheyashmi'u la'azno. He needs to be able to hear himself. Shneamar Shema Yisrael, as it says, Shema Yisrael you should hear. But tzarech is not such a strong language. He needs to, but b'diavad, if he doesn't, it's still okay. That's the implication. So if that's the case, so this is Rabbi Yehuda in the name of his Rabbi, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, that lechatchila you should be able to hear yourself say Shema, but b'diavad, if you can't, then it still works. So now we could say that Rabbi Yehuda himself holds that even lechatchila you could do it. And when our Mishnah said when you read Shema and you can't hear, you're still yotze, that's even lechatchila you can read Shema even though you can't hear. Because that's what Rabbi Yehuda holds. Even lechatchila it's okay. And when it said you could separate Truma, Rabbi Yehuda braid Rabbi Shimon Pazi, you could separate Truma even though you can't hear, even though he's a deaf person who can't hear, even lechatchila it's okay, that again will be Rabbi Yehuda. And the ones that say that only b'diavad it works, lechatchila, no, but b'diavad it works, that's Rabbi Yehuda in the name of his Rabbi, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Now that brayso continues, and it says, Amar lo Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir responded to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, or to Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and he said, Harei Omer. But it says in the continuation of Shema, it says, Asher anochi mitzavacha hayom ala levecha. Right, that you should speak of these words that I command you today on your heart. So, or these words should be on your heart. Now what does that imply? It sounds like it goes by the intent of your heart. And you don't have to say it out loud. That's what Rabbi Meir responds to Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah that when you read Shema, you need to be able to hear, at least l'chatchila. And Rabbi Meir responds, no, you don't need to be able to hear l'chatchila. It says it should be on your heart. So it goes by the intent of your heart. So the Gemara says, Hashta da'asis lahachi. Well, now that you've introduced us to a new opinion, the opinion of Rabbi Meir, so then afilu tema Rabbi Yehuda k'Rabbi Sfirle. So now we could say that Rabbi Yehuda holds like his Rabbi, V'lo kashya, and these various brachos won't be a contradiction, because we could say ha Rabbi Yehuda, ha Rabbi Meir. One is Rabbi Yehuda and one is Rabbi Meir. In other words, the ones that say that only lichatchila you do need to be able to hear, but b'diavad it's okay. That would be Rabbi Yehuda himself. The ones that say that even lichatchila you don't have to be able to hear, that will be Rabbi Meir. So when it said that the Rabbi Yehuda Breder of Shimon Bazil lichatchila you could separate truma without being able to hear, that's like Rabbi Meir who said lichatchila you could say Shema without being able to hear. And again, Rabbi Yehuda himself holds, and Rabbi Yehuda, in the name of his Rebbe, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, holds that lichatchila, if you can't hear, it's not good, but b'diavad, it's okay. And Rabbi Yossi holds that even b'diavad is not okay. How do we paskin? Whose opinion do we paskin like? Says the Gemara, Amar of Chisda, Amar of Shiloh, halacha ki Rabbi Yehuda, she'amar mishum Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. The halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, the name of his Rebbe, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. The halacha Rabbi Yehuda. The halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. So it's both like Rabbi Yehuda, the name of his Rebbe, and it's also like Rabbi Yehuda, which in the end we said is the same opinion. That lechatchila you shouldn't read it if you can't hear, but b'diavad it works. Utricha. Now we need both opinions. De'iyashma inan halacha Rabbi Yehuda, because if we had only taught that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, hava minafi lechatchila. So if it had just said that halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, I would have thought, well, if you read the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda says if you read Shema and you can't hear, you're yotzei. And I might have thought even lechatchila you could read Shema even though you can't hear yourself. So kamash malan halacha Rabbi Yehuda misham mishum Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. That's why he made sure to say also that halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who clearly says that lechatchila you should be able to hear, and told me b'diavad that it works. Now, had he only said that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda in the name of his Rebbe, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and not also said that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, so then hava amina, I would have thought, sarich vein lo takana. The language that he's quoted from his Rebbe, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, was you need to be able to hear. Now, I said before that need is a bit of a lighter language and implies that need, but if you don't, it's still okay. But that's not such a foolproof implication. It's not so tight. So I actually would have thought that need means need, and even b'diavad is no good if you can't hear. If you can't hear, there's nothing doing. Kamash malan halacha Rabbi Yehuda. That's why he also said, Rav Chisda, the name of Rabbi Shila, also said that halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, who says actually that it does work if you can't hear. So we understand that what we mean is that b'diavad it works even though you can't hear. So the halacha is that lechatchila you have to be able to hear yourself say Shema, but b'diavad if you didn't hear yourself, then you're still yotzei. Okay, now Amar of Yosef. Rav Yosef said about this, machlokas b'kriya Shema. This whole dispute is only with regards to Shema. Aval b'shar mitzvos, but when it comes to other mitzvos, divrei hakol lo yotze. Everybody agrees that you're not yotzei if you can't hear. Tichsiv, because it says in the pasuk, haskes u'shema Yisrael. So this is towards the end of the Torah. Moshe speaks to the Jewish people and he says, haskes u'shema Yisrael, which means like, pay attention and listen, Israel. And Rav Yosef is suggesting that what that means is you have to be able to hear for all the mitzvos. Now ask the Gemara, what do you mean? Meisvei, we have a contradiction. We just learned the Brachos that says, person shouldn't bench in their heart. But if you bench in your heart, you're still yotzei. You still fulfill your obligation. So how can you say everybody agrees that you have to be able to hear when it comes to other mitzvos if we have a Brachos that says that by benching, at least b'diavad, you don't have to be able to hear. So rather, we must have the wrong version of Rav Yosef. This is what Rav Yosef must have said. Amar Rav Yosef, machlokes b'kriya Shema, tichsiv Shema Yisrael. The machlokes about whether you have to be able to hear is specifically by Kriya Shema, where it says Shema, you should hear. So that's where Rabbi Yossi said you have to hear your words. And if you don't, you're not yotzei. And Rabbi Yehuda says, and there is Rebbe, that it's true, ideally you should hear, but b'diavad you're still yotze. Aval b'shar mitzvos, but when it comes to other mitzvos, divrei hakol yatsa. Everybody agrees that you're yotze. At least b'diavad, if you can't hear, you'll still be yotze. There, even Rabbi Yossi would agree by other mitzvos that b'diavad you're yotze. It's specifically by Shema, we have a special drasha, Shema Yisrael, that you have to be able to hear. But other mitzvos, at least b'diavad, Rabbi Yossi would agree that you're still yotze. Now, v'haksiv, but doesn't it say haskesu Shema Yisrael? Pay attention and listen, Israel, regarding mitzvos. Says the Gemara, how b'divrei Torah ksiv? No, that's talking about divrei Torah. When it comes to learning Torah, you have to haskesu Shema. Now, it's actually not clear what the implication is. So it's not telling you that you have to be able to hear all the mitzvahs. It's talking about when you learn Torah. But what's the lesson of it? Haskesu Shema. Rashi references a Gemara later, towards the end of the Masechta, that says, Kitasu atzmechem al divrei Torah. The Gemara has various things it derives from this pasuk. One of them is that you should divide into groups when you learn Torah, rather than learn by yourself. You should learn in groups. So it could be that's what it's telling you. Maybe it's expressing a preference to learn out loud. It's not so clear from our Gemara, but the Gemara says it's not saying that for the performance of mitzvahs, for the reciting of mitzvah words, of brachos and benching, and that it has to be heard. It's telling you that that by divrei Torah, haskesu Shema. You have to pay close attention and listen when you're learning Torah. That being so the conclusion of the Gemara is at least that when it comes to other mitzvos, even Rabbi Yossi would agree that you don't, that at least b'diavad, after the fact, lechatchila, you should always hear what you say, but b'diavad it would work even if you didn't hear. Okay, the next part of the Mishnah said, Kara v'lo dikdik v'osi yosel. If a person read the Shema, but he wasn't so careful about enunciating the words, so the Mishnah had two opinions. Rabbi Yossi said, you're not yotze. Rabbi Yossi said, you are yotze. And Rabbi Yehuda said, you're not yotze, you don't fulfill your obligation. Says the Gemara, Amar of Tavi, Amar of Yoshia, Halacha k'divrei shneim l'hakil. The halacha is like both to be lenient. What's both? Meaning this and the previous question. With regards to the question of reading the Shema and you can't hear, so the Tanakama, the first opinion, which was Rabbi Yehuda said you're yotze, even though you can't hear, and Rabbi Yossi said you're not yotze. And then it got flipped. It said if you read but you don't enunciate, Rabbi Yossi says you are yotze, and Rabbi Yehuda says you're not yotze. So Rav Tavi is saying in the name of Rabbi Yoshia that in both disputes we go with the more lenient opinion, and you're yotze either way. So even though you can't hear, you're yotze, b'diavad at least, and even though you didn't enunciate the words, you're still yotze. You still fulfill your obligation, at least b'diavad. Now, once we quote Rav Tavi in the name of Rav Yoshia, let's quote another teaching of his, even though it's somewhat unrelated. The Amar Rav Tavi Amar Rav Yoshia, Mai dichsiv. What is the meaning of the pasuk in Mishlei? It says, Shalosh heina lo tispana. There's three who are never satisfied. And two of the examples are Sheol, the Otzer Rechem, the grave, and one whose womb is closed. A closed womb. So, I think that in the simple understanding, it means that, it's from Mishlei, from Proverbs, that the grave is never full. It's always, there's always more people being buried. And I think maybe that's what it means, or maybe it means that it absorbs. I'm not 100% sure. And an Otzer Rechem, somebody who's barren, so no matter how much seed the husband gives, the rechem, the womb, is not going to be satisfied. It won't take. So now the Gemara, though, what's the drasha it's going to make? V'chima inyan she'ol etzel rechem. Says there must be some comparison though here between the grave and the rechem and the womb. What is it to teach you? El lomar lecha. It's to teach you that ma rechem machnis umotzi. Just like a womb you put something in and something comes out. The seed goes in and the fetus comes out. The baby comes out. Af sha'ol machnisu motzi. So to the grave, you put something in, something comes out. Put in a body, and it gets resurrected by Tchias HaMesim, by the resurrection. Balo dvarim kal v'chomer. He says it's you can make a logical kal v'chomer. Umar rechem shemachnisim bo b'chashai motzim meda b'koli kolos. If a rechem, a womb, where you put something in, it's silent, it's quiet. When the seed goes into the womb, it's quiet. Yet motziim mimenu b'koli kolos. Yet, when the seed fertilizes the womb, it is the egg in the womb. It's silent. Nobody witnesses that. Nobody hears it. But when they bring out the baby, it's crying. It's loud. It's koli kolos. So, af sha'ol. So sha'ol shemachnisim bo b'koli kolos. So the grave where you put something in with the loud sounds of crying of when the person's being buried, isn't it kal v'chomer? Isn't all the more so that there will be loud voices when we remove from it. Now, what is he referring to? See, when he says that, so he makes the kal v'chomer. Kal v'chomer is if when egg is fertilized, it's quiet, silent, and yet when the baby's born, it's loud. So, and we're comparing that to a body going to the grave and coming out. So a body which goes into the grave, it's loud and crying when it comes out. All the more so, it's going to be loud. It's not clear what the loud it's talking about is. What's the noise? Is it the celebration of Tchias HaMesim? That would be my first thought. On the other hand, though, the Gemara goes on, and it says, Mikan tshuva la'omer min Tchias HaMesim min HaTorah. From here you have a response to those who say there's no source for the resurrection in the Torah. So here's a source. This drasha is a source for the idea of Tchias HaMesim, of a resurrection. The Gemara elsewhere has many other sources, but this is just one. And I'm wondering if maybe that's the koli kolos, that's the crying, that those who doubted it are gonna cry. Although it's hard to say that because I don't think they would be there. So a little bit unclear. What is the koli kolos? What is the sound that it's referring to? Maybe it's a celebration upon the resurrection of the dead. Okay, Tani Rav Oshia kamei de Rava. Rav Oshia taught in front of Rava. Uchsavtam. It says that Uchsavtam amuzuz pesach avishar. You should write them, the words of Shema, on your doorposts and on your gateways. What does that teach me? Hakol biksav afigu tzavos. Rav Oshia says it teaches me that you write the whole thing, even the commands, because uchsav tam implies there's a drasha you can make that it should be a kasiva tama, a complete writing, which we learn a number of things from. But one of them we learn things with regards to the letters. But one of the things we learn is that you write the whole thing, even the commands. So you might have thought you shouldn't write, and you shall write, the command of writing. But no, Savtam says the whole thing, the whole Shema. Amar le, so Rava said to Rav Oshia, de Amar lechamani, who said this to you? In other words, I think he's asking him, like, why would you think otherwise? And why do you need a special pasuk to say you write the whole thing? Why do you need a drasha of uchsav tam? You should write a ksiva tama complete. What if it just said bekasav? Then you should write this. Would that be lacking? I wouldn't know that you write the whole thing. I would just assume you write the whole thing. So he responded, he said, Rabbi Yehuda, it's according to Rabbi Yehuda that we need it. De Amar Gabe Sota alos kosev, tzavos eno kosev. So by the sota, it says, so a sota is a woman who was alone with another man, was warned, and then was alone again, and her husband brings her to the Beis Hamikdash, and there's a process to clarify if she sinned with the other man or not, and it says in the Torah, V'chasav es ha'alos ha'ela, and he, the Kohen, should write these curses on a parchment. Now, does he write just the curses, or does he write the whole thing? And he should write the curses. Does he write that as well? The command to write. So, Rabbi Yehuda says, alos kosev, he writes the curses, tzavos eno kosev. He doesn't write the command. He doesn't write the whole pasuk, v'chasav, and he shall write. He just writes the curse. There's other commands there that the Kohen makes her swear, and he says no. He only writes Yitei Hashem oscha la'alav v'lishvua, that Hashem should make you a curse to sign. So Rabbi Yehuda says you only write the curses, you don't write the commands. V'chasam hu d'chsiv, and there it says, it's written, v'chasav es ha'alos ha'ela. There it says, and he should write the curses. So, abahacha d'chsiv uchsavtam, but here it doesn't say v'chasav, it says uchsavtam. Afilu tavos nami, you even write the commands. In other words, the Gemara thinks, at least at this point, that the reason why Rabbi Yehuda limited it and said you only write the curses is because it said v'chasav, and he writes. It didn't say uchsavtam, and write them. But had it written uchsavtam, then I would say you write even the commands, not just the curses. But here, by Shema, where it says uchsavtam, that teaches me that you write the whole thing. Says the Gemara, atu taimid Rabbi Yehuda mishum d'chsiv v'chasav. Is the reason that Rabbi Yehuda says to only write the curses because it doesn't say uchsavtam, rather it says v'chasav, and he should write? That's not why he says that. Taimid Rabbi Yehuda mishum d'chsiv alos. The reason he says to write the curses is because it says to write the curses. It says v'chasav es ha'alos. You should write the curses. Alos in tzavos lo. The curses, yes, and not the commands. So the only reason by sota that I would think you write the reason by sota that you write only the curses is because it says to write the curses. Had it said to write everything, then I would have known to write. Had it just said v'chasav and he should write, then I would have said also that you write everything. It's not because it says v'chasav and not uchsavtam that I say it's limited to the curses. It's because it says to write the curses that it's limited to the curses. So when it comes to Shema, why would I think that it makes a difference that it says uchsavtam v'chasav? Either way, it means to write the whole thing. So why do you have to tell me that it's because it says uchsavtam, that's why you write the whole thing? Says the Gemara, you still need it. It's only because it says uchsavtam, that's why you write the whole thing. Why? Because I would have thought to learn from sota. It says ksiva, it says writing by sota, and it says writing by Shema, by mezuzah. We're talking about mezuzah and tefillin, by the way. When we're talking about what you write, we're talking about in the mezuzah and in the tefillin. So I would have thought to learn from sota. Ma hasam alos in tzavos lo. Just like there by sota, it's specifically the curses and not the commands. So I would have said, Avhacha nami tzavos lo. I would have said that by Shema, by tefillin and mezuzah, where you write Shema, it's only it doesn't include the command, just like by sota. We learn ksiva. That's why kasav rachman uchsavtam. That's why he has to say uchsavtam. It should be a ksiva tama, complete writing, afilu tzavos, to teach you even the commands. So the reason you need the drasha of uchsavtam, and you should write a ksiva tama, complete even the commands, is that you don't learn from Sota to limit it and not write the commands. Fine. One more Gemara. Tani Rav Ovadia kamei de Rava. Rav Ovadia taught in front of Rava, v'limadatem. So it says in the second paragraph of Shema, it says, v'limadatem osmas b'nechem l'daber b'am. You should teach your children to speak of them. Says Rav Ovadia before Rava, sheyehi limudcha tam. It teaches you that your teaching should be complete. What does it mean to have a complete teaching? She'iting revach ben advekim. That you should allow space between the words that are connected. And this seems to be a lesson in how to teach reading, how to teach words, to make sure that you don't connect two words that are next to each other to make that they sound like one word. So the Gemara will give examples, right? Ani Rava Basrei, Rava responded afterwards, and he gave examples. Al livavecha. So al, if you just say al livavecha, it sounds like one word because it's lamed lamed. So you have to say al livavecha, and al livavchem, and bechol livavcha, and bechol livavchem. Another example, this one's a little different because it's a vase and a base, but esev bisadcha, or vavadatem mehera, hakanaf pisil, eschem me'aretz. All of these are examples of words within the 3 paragraphs of Shema where one word ends with a letter and the next word starts with the same letter. If you're not careful, you'll turn it into one word. And we're learning that it seems in this context it's v'limadatem, you should teach in this way, but it's true also for reciting Shema that you should be careful to separate these words. Amar Rav Chama Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Chama said in the name of Rabbi Chanina, Kol hakore kriya Shema medaktik bos yosel. Anyone who reads Shema and is careful with the letters, mitzanenin lo gehenem. His gehenem is cooled off. Shenemar, as we learn in a pasuk, the pasuk is in Tehillim. It says, Bifares shakai melachim ba tashleg bitzamon, which literally means like when Hashem scatters the kings, it will snow in Tzalmon. But the Gemara makes a drasha. It says, Al tikri bifares ela bifaresh. Don't read it as when he scatters bifares, rather bifaresh when he explains. And Al tikri bitzalmon ela bitzalmavis. Don't read it as Talmon, read it as Tzalmavis. So now it would read bifaresh shakai melachim ba, which I think would mean like when he's mefarish, when he explains, when he clearly enunciates the names of Hashem. The names of Hashem, the names of kings in the Shema, then tishaleg b'tzalmavis, then it will snow in Tzalmavis is the valley of death, in Gehenna. So interesting drasha that if a person is mefarish, they speak out the words milachim. I think maybe it's like malchus shamayim. It's the acceptance, the yoke of heaven. That's why we're talking about Shema. If you're mefarish, if you're explicit about the words, so then tashleg b'tzalmavis, it will snow in Gehenna, it will cool off one's Gehenna. Okay, with that, we stop here, and we'll pick up from the next line next time.